Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Startup Send podcast. This is your host, Jonah Lupton. Another great episode for you today. Thanks for staying with us. As always, if you want to send me an email, give me some reviews on the show, what you like, what you don't like, you can do that. My email address is jonahlupton@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, pretty much any social media platform. My tags or my hashtags or usernames are at Jonah Lupton. Today's guest is Alex Doubet. He is the solo founder of a company called Door. The website is doorhomes.com. They are based down in the Dallas area. So right now they're essentially just operating out of DFW, which is Dallas-Fort Worth. Nice area. I've been down there a couple times, growing extremely fast, which is probably one reason that they are down there. They picked a nice area. Company has raised, looking at Crunchbase right now, about $3.1 million. They are at 12 employees right now, and they are disrupting the real estate space. There are other real estate companies out there doing, not necessarily what they're doing, but there are a lot of tech companies out there, software companies trying to disrupt the space. They're doing something very, very unique, and they're having a lot of success with it. They did their first transaction early last year. So they're about 18 months in and about to surpass $100 million in transaction value, which is incredible. So let's welcome Alex to the show, learn more about the company. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Jonah.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for joining us today. So tell us more about your company. What does Door do?
Yeah, so Door is a tech-enabled residential real estate brokerage, and we charge a flat $5,000 per side, and that might sound like a lot of money, but the customary commission structure when you're buying and selling homes is 6%. So on a $300,000 house, you're paying $18,000 in commission to real estate agents. On a $500,000 house, you're paying $30,000 in commission to real estate agents. So we charge a flat $5,000. And that means on the buy side, if you're buying a home with us, we're giving you back money. On the sell side, you're saving money. Our first year, last year, our average client saved $15,000 with Door. And the tech-enabled part of it comes in with our real estate agents who are employees, not independent contractors, as is customary. They do many more transactions than what you see in the old-fashioned brokerage space. Here in North Texas, at least, the average old-fashioned real estate agent does 3 transactions per year, and our agents do north of 4 per month. So you get a much better professional real estate agent here at Door, someone who has much more market knowledge, much more experience negotiating, all those sorts of things. So you get a better product. Our agents are more efficient. They have good, steady jobs, and we save our clients a lot of money while providing them great service.
So how are you finding so much business for your agents? Where's it all coming from?
Yeah, so one of the big innovations I think that we're trying to affect here is that traditionally the way that you find a real estate agent is it's either your friend or family member or referred by your friend and family member. That's about 2/3 of the reason why you use a real estate agent. That is not the case at Door. We want to be friendly and friends with our clients, but our clients are coming to us not because of a friendship or family relationship to begin with. So they're coming inbound, and that's a host of mediums. That's obviously online, search, social, but also we're experimenting with some broadcast mediums, radio, newspaper, and so forth.
So are these real estate agents that work for Door, essentially, they're giving up the commission, I don't know, what commission income, I guess, that has unlimited potential for a salary position?
Yeah, and one of the misconceptions in the space, I think, is that a lot of real estate agents come in and they come into the space because they want to hopefully be the $1 million producer. The kind of the seedy underbelly in the space is the average real estate agent really doesn't make that much money. They average $30,000 to $40,000 depending on the source you look at. We pay our agents more than what the average agent makes to start, and then they can earn more through bonuses and so forth. So our agents make more money. They have a steady job. So it's actually a much better employment structure, I think. People ask me sometimes, why would a real estate agent come work for Door? And I always say, we don't want them to come work for Door. I want to find great people and train them to be an agent at Door. I don't want to find a real estate agent and hope that they're a great person. And if we run across a real estate agent who's great, we'll hire them. But most real estate agents, in our experience, are in the space for the wrong reasons. They They want a part-time job. They want total flexibility. Again, they hope that they're going to be the $1 million producer, even though the vast majority are not. We want someone who is incredibly client-focused, who is really a great person, a smart person, a hard worker. We hire them, give them a great job, train them, and then I think deliver a better client experience.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that have tried real estate and it just didn't work for them. So there's just so much turnover in that industry. I mean, what percentage of real estate agents nationally are even $1 million producers?
I would only be guessing. I would imagine it's 1% or less. It's kind of the 90-10 or the 80-20 rule in the space, where 10 or 20% of the agents are doing the vast majority of the transactions. But by comparison, all of our transaction-facing real estate agents are top 1% in North Texas. And so my lead listing agent, for instance, she sells 5 to 10 homes every single month. My lead buyer's agent sold 10 homes, or rather bought 10 homes this month for clients. He's got 5 plus already queued up next month. So again, you get a true professional, a great professional, but someone that has much more market experience because they're transacting at a level that you just don't see in the space.
So let's take the person that did 8 or 10 transactions. That's essentially $5,000 a transaction, correct?
Correct.
So that's $40,000 to $50,000 that in fees that month. Does some of that go to them as kind of a bonus, and then the rest go to door?
Yeah, exactly. The vast majority of agents' compensation is going to be base. There is a small bonus and call it commission component, but we want our clients to, or rather our employees, to be comfortable, and we want them to be focused on giving clients great service. We don't want to incentivize them to fight with clients to just move houses for the sake of getting the turn. And you see that a lot in the old-fashioned space. And one of the questions we encounter sometimes, for instance, is twofold. First, on the buy side, I think the traditional commission structure is really screwy because you're buying a house and your agent is supposed to be negotiating for you, but when you're buying a house, they're incentivized actually for you to pay more. They're getting paid more if you buy a bigger house, a more expensive house. So I think that is a really bad conflict of interest that you really can't get around in the old-fashioned commission structure. On the flip side is selling a home. And I've heard the question, why are your agents incentivized to sell the house? They're not making any more money if the house sells. And I would answer that. You may have read the Freakonomics book, the study they had in there about San Francisco real estate agents. Does that ring a bell?
I have not read the book, but I've certainly heard of it.
Yeah, so the study they did was they were looking in San Francisco, and these are kind of round numbers, but basically what they found was that real estate agents would keep their own house on the market, I think it was an average of 2 weeks longer, and sell it for $10,000 more than they would for clients. And the reason's pretty obvious. If you're selling a $500,000 house, the difference for you as an agent between $500,000 and $510,000 is $300. And once you factor in the commission split with the traditional brokerage, maybe it's only $150. So to argue that old-fashioned agents are incentivized to get you a higher price is really a misnomer in my mind, because on the margin, they're not. And so coming back to door, we've got a fantastic pricing methodology. We're 98% price accurate. And I view it very differently. I view it as we maximize your net proceeds, and we get you a top of market price, and we're saving you a lot of money. So your net proceeds are always going to be better with door versus working with an old-fashioned agent, because they're not really incentivized to get you a high price. They're incentivized to get the turn. That's where the bulk of their compensation comes.
You told me an interesting stat in our pre-call, which was that your average transaction is like twice what the average transaction is for the surrounding areas, right? Somewhere in the 600,000. So why, and is it as simple as, the luxury market loves door because you guys are saving them more money by only taking 5,000 instead of 5%?
Yeah, so our last year we averaged about $650,000 as an average transaction price. This year we're a little bit under that, but $631,000 at last look. So it's pretty steady. But I think we're doing something unprecedented. Usually what you see with a flat fee brokerage, and I'll come back to that idea because there's an interesting point there, but usually you see flat fee brokerages playing in the $200,000 and $300,000 space. And I think the reason is they tend to position themselves as cheap. And what I've come to learn in this space is people don't want cheap. They may want inexpensive or less expensive. They don't want cheap because this is the biggest transaction of their life. And so I think what our high transaction price, and the data I've seen is we're actually the second highest average transaction price in DFW right now. So we are selling $1 million+ homes every single month. And I think that speaks to the quality of the brand and the service that we're building. You don't transact $1 million+ homes unless you can deliver high quality service and a great product, great brand. And we're doing that. And I would anticipate that as we grow, that average transaction price comes down just because we're going to be growing into areas where the home values are not quite so high. Right. But nevertheless, I'm really gratified by the trust that those $1 million+ homeowners put in door to sell their houses because it is a lot of trust.
Now, right now, as I said, you guys are in just DFW. What are your expansion plans?
Yeah, so we're headquartered in Dallas, in an area called Uptown, and the majority of our transactions thus far have been in Dallas County and Collin County, so eastern DFW. We're pushing over into Fort Worth, and that office that will open up over there really be geared towards servicing Fort Worth and Denton County, so Tarrant County and Denton County. And then we're looking to other cities in Texas, and I don't know what the next one will be quite yet, but the obvious next steps are Austin and or Houston. So we're analyzing those two markets. I don't know which next will actually be next, though.
When do you think you'll leave the state of Texas?
That's a hard one to answer. I think a lot of that is going to be dependent on our performance over the next 12 months. I think the best way to answer that is we'll do it when it makes sense, and maybe that's arguably a non-answer. But we don't want to replicate what we've seen in some models, which is you spread too fast, too quickly, and you're spread too thin, really, and you never really prove anything. And by that I mean you see some models, Redfin, for instance, is one that comes to mind, where the highest market penetration they have is about 3% from what I've read in Seattle, where they started. They're in 50 or 60 cities now. Wow. And they really don't have above 0.5% market share in those other cities. And so you're loading on this additional expense, and you're not really changing the market anywhere, and we don't want to do that. And so we want to go out of the state when it makes sense to do so. So when we look at our model and we think we've got the traction, we know how to do it, then we'll start looking to other states.
What's different from your model to Redfin's? How are you guys different?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things in my mind is one of just timing. And I've read before that the plurality of the reason why a business succeeds or fails is nothing other than timing. So Amazon, for instance, they started when the internet happened to be in its infancy and grew by thousands of percentage points a year. That was a major rising tide for them. Uber started when smartphones were reaching a sufficient market penetration. With Redfin, I think what you see is something interesting. They started about a dozen years ago, and today about 95% of home buyers look online when they're looking to buy a home. So the MLS, you might have heard the term, the multiple listing service, that's the incredibly fragmented system nationwide that syndicates listings out from realtors to the general public. Zillow, truly, Redfin itself is a search engine. All those search engines for real estate came about in the early to mid 2000s, and today essentially everybody looks online to search for homes. So the agent has lost control of that information flow. Looking at Redfin, they started before that was the case. They really pioneered the real estate search engine. They were one of the first, if not the first, real estate search engine. But I think one of the missteps was simply that of timing. And in my view, I think they've morphed into more or less a traditional brokerage. They do have some pricing differentiators, but they're very much still reliant on their agents drumming up business, which is the old style model. And they really haven't, in my view, communicated their value proposition well enough. And here in Dallas, for instance, they're weighted 70% towards buyers. They don't really get listings. By comparison, we're 60% listings. So the majority of our business is listings. And in my view, that's really the disruptive part of this business, is we have to find the listings because that is a listing agreement is essentially a monopoly on a single item for sale in the world. And that's the disruptive piece of the business. So I think we are building a brand and a process that attracts clients. We're not reliant on our agents to bring in business, and that's a paradigm shift. It's a slight change, but it's a paradigm shift. Historically, the majority of the reason why you use an agent is because it's your friend or family member referred by your friend or family member. Our sellers and buyers are coming inbound to us because of the brand, because of the process, not because of any of our agents individually. Rather, I view it as because of all of them collectively and the great product and service we deliver.
Let's talk about those inbound leads. What is the marketing strategy? I mean, are you guys, is it social? Is it, I mean, there's probably a lot of things that you could be doing, but what seems to be working the best? What's driving traffic into door?
Well, I'll tell you one of the most surprising things for us. Two, I think, surprising things that I would note. The first is we have a site that has all of the active listings in North Texas right now. And what we've seen is we've actually started to compete with Zillow and Trulia in the search engine results pages. So organic traffic is increasingly a big driver for us of leads. That means you Google, 123 Main Street because you saw that it was for sale, and doorhomes.com/123 Main Street. That web page is increasingly competing with Zillow.com/123 Main Street or Trulia.com/123 Main Street. And that organic traffic is evergreen traffic. It's free once you set up the capital cost of the website. And that's been a happy surprise, I'd say, is that we're starting to see our site compete well on the SERPs. And that's one of the reasons why Zillow and Trulia have such dominant positions, is because they have so much organic traffic from those address-specific searches. The second most surprising thing in my mind it has been the demographic that has been our big client base. Because when I started the company, I thought this was going to be a millennial-focused company. And in reality, what surprised me... What's that?
I would have thought so, too. I mean, you think any new, innovative, twist on an old industry is going to attract the younger millennial audience first.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And what surprised me is our biggest client base has been 40 plus years old, and second plus time home seller or buyer. And I think that speaks to a couple things. One, there's not a re-education required in that space. Secondly, they've bought or sold before. They've looked at the closing disclosure and they've said, holy cow, why am I paying all this money?
Right.
And so that leads me to answer your question. Social media has been a big driver for us. Search engine marketing, organic search engine traffic has been great for us. But then also broadcast mediums, which has kind of surprised me because that's not the zeitgeist today. We hear social media advertising, search engine marketing, but radio, television, newspaper, those things have been very effective for us.
How have social media ads like Facebook ads performed?
They perform well. I think one of the difficulties in this space is only roughly 2.5% of people are buying or selling a home in North Texas at any given point. So the vast majority of people are not, and they don't need our services, and they don't want to talk to a real estate agent. So what does that indicate? That indicates that you have to broadcast to a lot of people who don't need your service in any given year.
Right. Okay. I gotcha. Yeah. Facebook ads. It's probably hard. I mean, there's so many ways you can target Facebook ads, but it's probably hard to do it towards people that are hoping to buy or sell in the next few months.
Yeah. I mean, what I would love to figure out is what does that silver bullet to find people who are about to buy a house or find people who are about to sell a house, but I increasingly think there's not one. Maybe there is, but no one's figured it out yet.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I could probably come up with something if I try hard enough, but nothing's coming to mind right now. Talk to us about, when did you actually start this business? So I mentioned that your first transaction was early last year. When did you actually form the company, and what were you doing before this?
Sure. So I was actually running an online marketing agency as the chief operating officer before Door. I launched Door Q4 2015. Raised a seed round of about $800,000, and then we just closed a Series A in March of 2017 of $2.3 million. And I was running that online marketing agency. Also, a few years back, I bought and sold a couple apartment complexes. So I was in the real estate space, but as a principal, as an owner, not as a broker. And the seed idea for Door was an experience that my mom had. She sold her house where we grew up, and she'd lived there for 15 or 18 years, and she paid 6%, $53,000 in her case. And the kicker for me was that here's this single mom, sold this house that she'd paid for 18 years, and she didn't get a thank you note or a bottle of wine or anything after paying over $50,000. And I just looked at that and I thought, how can a presumptuous, bad, opaque transaction still happen today with the internet? And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And so Door was born out of that experience, and here we are.
So how much do you worry about your success in Texas leading to copycats around the country?
Yeah, I actually welcome that. I do, because the market's huge. There were something like 6 million transactions, residential transactions last year, 5 million going back a couple of years. So that has increased. So the market's gigantic. There's room for a lot of different companies. And the reason why I say I welcome that is because I think the collection of next generation brokerages will have more capital than Door singularly will ever have. And as they advertise more, as they get the populace thinking about, well, maybe there's a different way to do this, that's just going to accelerate the demise of the old-fashioned brokerage space, because I think we're on the precipice of wholesale change in this space in the next 5 or 10 years. Once people start to realize, well, wait a second, Door in Dallas has transacted $100 million, then $200 million, then $500 million of real estate. It's pretty hard to argue that this doesn't work. In fact, I would say you can't argue that today, that this works. And so as more entrants come into the space, I think that's just going to accelerate this thinking, because it's just going to funnel more marketing dollars into the space, getting people to think differently.
Right. Just like, buying cars online, the first few companies that did it probably welcomed the competition because they knew it was $1 trillion industry.
Yeah,
and the more
exactly.
people that jump into it, the more it starts to change consumer behavior.
Yep. Exactly.
What's been the biggest challenge? I mean, since you guys are really doing this with a whole new business model, like let's pay our agents a nice salary so they like their job and they give great service and they do what's right by the customer, and then we'll make $5,000 on each transaction, and hopefully at the end of the day, we make more money than we have some profit left over. So
yeah. Well, I'll say a few things. One thing I mentioned earlier that I wanted to come back to is one of the things we hear a lot, is, particularly from old-fashioned agents, is they say one of a few things. They say, this has been tried before. It never works. They say, oh, they're fly-by-night operators. They'll be here today, gone tomorrow. They say, you get what you pay for. And none of those things are true. I mean, we give great service. We've got fantastic reviews from our clients. We just raised a couple $1 million, so we're not going to be gone tomorrow. We're here for at least a couple years. But then that third one of you get what you pay for, I think that's so interesting, because I always say, when did $5,000 become not a lot of money? If you put $5,000 in cash in front of just about anyone, they'd be thrilled. That'd be a great day. And in what other sphere of your life do you pay $5,000 for something? There's really not many times where that happens. It's houses, of course. It's cars, major appliances. There really aren't many instances. And so I look at the $5,000 fee as a lot of money to be paid for a great service. And I really hold people's money in high esteem and think that we need to deliver a great service and continue making it better, to save them money, to make money at door, and to build a better way to do this. But so I think that bad mouthing from agents, I don't lose sleep at night over it, but that's certainly something that I think we do face on a regular basis. I think that the big one in my mind is just the complexity of the transaction. It is not, buying a pair of socks online. It is not a simple transaction. It is a complex transaction. And I think because of that, and because of the fact that door is a new way of doing this, people are a little bit hesitant. We're trying to find the early adopters right now. We're trying to find the people who are willing to try something new that does work, but is new, relatively speaking. And there's a little bit of re-education needed. And because the commission structure is opaque and comes out of the closing table, it sometimes seems that it's just easier for people to use an old-fashioned agent just because that's the easy thing to do. But I just urge people, and I always tell people, really look at the economics, because here's an interesting point. We looked at two people in their mid-20s who bought and sold the same house. The guy that uses door throughout his life and saves the difference or the refund on the buy side or the savings on the sell side and just puts that into the S&P index fund, that guy's going to have a net worth $1.4 million higher by the time he retires by making that one change. And so the dollars that people are throwing around in these transactions are really giant, and it really motivates me to help save people those home equity dollars, because that's a big effect today, but it's a massive effect 40 years from now when you retire.
How many homes does the average person buy and sell over their lifetime?
On average, you see people move every 5 to 7 years. The median age of first-time homeownership is about 31 over the past 3 decades. So,
okay,
30 to 70.
Is that number going up or coming down?
That stayed pretty steady for the past 3 decades from the data that I've seen. So call that 40 years of home buying. So 4 to 6 houses, somewhere in there.
Okay. You guys raised your first round of capital when? Early 2016?
Right.
Okay. How hard was it raising that first round?
A lot harder than the second time. It took probably 8 or 9 months the first go round, and second go round 3 months. And when we actually started collecting funds, we were oversubscribed, and we closed all the money in about 14 days, maybe even 10.
What was so hard the first time? I mean, was it just new business model? Was it, you didn't have a big investor network, just a lot of no's because people didn't understand the sector? Like, what do you think the hurdle was?
Well, I think the first go round, it was just an idea. I was fortunate enough to know people who'd invested with me on the apartment buildings and who I knew growing up in Dallas. And it was just an idea. And they were, crazy enough or respected me enough or something that they were willing to invest in me and invest in this idea that I thought could work. And then the second go round, we actually had revenue, and it was proven on a small level. And so the first time was an idea, and the second time was an idea with some revenue.
Do you think you'll have to raise more capital?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And want to, because we want to make this big fast, because while I don't worry about the other competitors coming into the space, they will, and we want to win. We want to be the biggest. Right.
Nope. Totally makes sense. Once you leave Texas, I mean, are there particular markets, affluent markets that you guys would target?
Certainly are. Denver just pops to mind immediately, and there's some interesting innovation going on in Denver. And that city's seen some fantastic growth, much like DFW. Of course, the major metros, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, New York, those would all be pretty high on the list of cities we'd explore.
Okay. What else would you like to share with us that we haven't had a chance to chat about? Actually, I got one question for you. I think you said earlier that you like to find a good person and then train them to be a good agent. What do you look for in people?
That one's hard. That is really hard. I would say a few things, and just to reiterate, hiring is very difficult, I think, and it's important, and it's really critical, and I think it's worthwhile to stay disciplined and wait for a great person rather than settle for a good person. And that sounds brutal, but I think it's true. And I think character is certainly high on the list. You want someone honest. You want someone who's a hard worker, who's trustworthy. And I think in my mind, for what we're doing, it needs someone who sees the vision, someone who understands what we're building and is willing to take a risk on that. Because if I'm right, if Door is the right idea, I mean, this will be a giant company. And I want to find people who are excited by that, because at a startup, as I'm sure you know, you can't wear the same hat even every day. You're pulled in a million different directions, and your job description today will almost certainly be different 3 months from now. And in fact, I like to say every quarter is like a year at a startup, because it's almost like dog years. You just things change so rapidly. So you need people who are okay with that flux and see the vision and can help, bring where we are today to where I think we can be in 5 years. And that's not everyone. A lot of people like the predictability and the regular cadence of a established company. And that's not a startup, and those people are not going to like this environment, or any startup environment, I think.
Is there a particular industry, though, that you had some success hiring from, whether it be teachers or, baristas at coffee shops? I mean,
not really thus far. And I think, perhaps when we have hired our 100th employee, I'll be able to answer that better.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get to chat in a couple of years, and I'll tell you about all the progress we've made, and maybe I have a better answer then, but not so far. It's been all over the board.
So back to the last question was, anything that you wanted to share that we didn't get a chance to chat about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I love talking to people starting companies, because I was there 18 months ago, and it can be a lonely seat for sure, because you feel like you're crazy, but you think you've got a good idea. But I think there are two things. One is, in my view, there's really there are two secrets to starting a company, and the first is you just got to do one thing towards the idea every single day. And that sounds like it's just stupidly simple, but so many people just don't do that. And when you're starting a company, you got to figure out what the big things are, what are the big tasks that need to be accomplished, and then just keep pushing. I like to call it, you're kind of poking on the world, and the world starts changing. And it's tough to have the discipline to come in every single day and just make one step forward. But it's amazing when you look back over 6, 12, 18 months to see the progress. And further, by making one step every day, you're in the game, and then some magic happens every now and then. And I'm a big fan of just, random lunches and coffees with people just to network. But we were on the cover of the Dallas Morning News June 1st last year, for instance. And that was a gigantic PR hit for us. And by all rights, we probably shouldn't have been there, but we were. And it came about because of a couple random coffees. One thing led to the next, and then we were on the cover of the Dallas Morning News. And had we not done a few transactions, had I not, called and pounded the phones trying to get some deals going, we wouldn't have been able to get on the cover. But I did, and we did that, and that was a huge game changer for us.
Keep going.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is, I think, it takes the same amount of time to work on a small idea as it does on a big idea. So, wait for the big idea, in my opinion, because you've only got 24 hours a day. You've only got 365 days a year. So work on something that's big, because it's fun.
So last question here, then I'll let you go, because I know you're a busy guy and you got some real estate to sell. But if you could go back 2 years and give yourself any piece of advice, what would it be?
That's a good question.
I was due.
What's that?
I was due for a good one.
The first thing comes to mind is think bigger, because I think I made some decisions my first year running Door where I was thinking about holding onto our cash to make sure that we didn't run out of cash. And that's undoubtedly the right thing to do, because if you run out of cash, you're dead.
Yeah.
But by the same token, think big, because like I just said, it takes as much time to work on a big idea as a small one. And there are a couple things that I wish I'd done that would have cost, $5,000 or $10,000, maybe something like that.
What's an example? Are you able to give us anything?
Some advertising things that we should have done, stuff like that. Some hires that maybe we should have made. But I was concerned with conserving our cash, which I don't think is a wrong impulse.
Nope.
And one of the things I learned after we raised our Series A is I think that expanded my thinking a bit to where now I try to think bigger every single day. And, it's easy, particularly when you're a frugal startup person, to think, I don't want to spend money to buy a new computer when I could buy a refurbished one. I've done that, certainly, and that's kind of a trivial example, but there are things like that where I try to hold on to every nickel. But I think at times you're better served to think bigger, move more quickly, figure out what drives the most value rather than what saves the most money.
I lied about that being my last question. I do have one more, and I just think I'm very fascinated with this because I think you guys are solving a huge problem in a massive industry, and you really are changing the way that homes are going to be bought and sold, and I think that's pretty cool. So where do you see this company in 3 to 5 years? How big can you guys be, and how fast can you get there?
Yeah. I don't think there's any inherent reason why this can't be a multi-billion-dollar company. Zero. And I think that's up to us and our execution.
Right.
And that's the goal, and it has been from the beginning. So 3 to 5 years from now, if we're not in a handful of states, we're doing something wrong, or something has gone wrong. And I would hope that 3 to 5 years from now, we've got 1,000 employees, call it, something like that. And I love every time we close a transaction, because that means we just saved someone a bunch of money they can spend on their family or their savings or anything other than real estate fees. And I hope that we can kind of bring the gospel to other people, so to speak, the gospel of real estate fee savings, because it means so much to me. And I saw it with my mom. I would much rather her have saved, $20,000, $40,000, whatever it would have been, had Door existed. And there are a lot of stories like that. So we got to keep finding those people who want to save the money and understand the value that we're bringing. And I hope 3 to 5 years from now, you're reading about us in the New York Times. That'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah, the real estate industry has definitely been doing certain things for a long time the same way, and I guess it is time for some change. So glad you guys are bringing some change.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time today.
You as well. Thanks so much.
Being so open and honest with us about all these numbers and the challenges and everything else. So I think it's great advice for all the listeners. What's the best way that we can connect with you online? Do you use any social media, or do you want to give out an email address or anything?
Yeah, email is great. If anyone wants to email me, my email address is D like dog, OU, B like boy, ET @doorhomes.com. So Doubet @doorhomes.com.
Okay, cool. I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much, man. Wish you guys the best. Looks like you're off to a great start, and hope things continue for you, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks, Jonah.
You got it, man. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.